Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Hashtag Real Talk. Actually, kind of a special episode. This is a sneak peek into some of the stuff that we're going to be doing this fall, as this is not the first official episode of the next season, but more kind of like a recap of the craziness of this summer. Some housekeeping items I want to go through before we talk about today's topic. Standard disclaimer, the things that we're going to discuss today are not necessarily representative of views and opinions of our awesome employer. I'm going to get to my guest in a minute, but let's get to some schedule stuff. So the podcast is going to be starting back up in September. Our first topic is going to, first official topic is going to be MFA and identity, and we're going to be talking with Ping. We're going to be going over some charity work, some wonderful charity work, and deep and dive in the subject that is MFA and why it's so important to organizations like ours. The end of September is going to be GurCon, so we just finished CloudCon. It's time to go into the greatest hacker conference in the world. I would say Midwest, but I'll call it out. I'm going to say in the world. We're going to be at GurCon. We're going to be having a table there. We're going to be doing a remote podcast from there also. I'm going to be doing a fundraiser part. I actually have one of the cornholes boards left over. I kept one from CloudCon.
That's awesome.
So we're going to be doing a raffle at GurCon and raising money for Hack for Kids. So shout out to Chris Payne and Jamie Payne. I call her the mother of GurCon Dragons. In November, we're going to be at the C3 Tech Summit. I'm going to be emceeing a panel there on disaster recovery and business continuity, which is a little topic we're going to recap today, and then also doing a podcast with them ahead of the summit. So now that all of those housekeeping items are done, I'm going to shut up for a minute and introduce my guest, my teammate, co-star, compadre in crime, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
Tyler, introduce yourself to everybody.
Howdy, I am Tyler Adams. I've been working with Breg here for a couple of years. I call him Breg because we have so many Aarons. We just use last names. So it kind of took me under his wing a couple of years ago, a little bit of a mentor role, and I've done one with you before with Steve over there from Fortinet too. So happy to be here and happy to talk about a couple of the hot ticket items that are coming up because they are always prevalent and even more so with the MFA piece. Just do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
All right, we're gonna jump right in. The two kind of key topics that we're going to talk about today is we're going to kind of retro Crowdstrike, and because both Tyler and I were in the field when the poop was hitting the fan with the blue screens.
Yeah.
And kind of some lessons learned from that. We'll talk a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in healthcare security, especially with working with the business, some of the challenges that we're having, and finally we're going to finish out with a little bit about data security and how, with the business changing and AI coming and everything else, we're seeing a giant reset when it comes to data security. So let's hop right into the CrowdStrike incident. So you and I, first thing Friday morning, right?
Still foggy-eyed.
Yep, I got alert. I had people reaching out about 6 a.m. saying, Breg, wake up, stuff's going down. We reached out to a couple different people, and then our leadership moved quickly to kind of formulate a plan to kind of see how we're going to do it. We had, obviously, we have, I can't even remember how many hospitals we have, but I think at one time we had potentially up to 40,000 devices like that were affected. This happened to be the weekend that we were going with giant go live with our one EMR.
It was wild.
Right, so 2 days before go live of the big EMR project, we had this happening. Leadership moved quickly to get us signed up and our BitLocker access, right? Because we're analysts in the field. We don't have admin rights anymore, right?
Least
all that
privilege.
stuff.
Shout out.
Yep. all that stuff was taken away, but they came up with a game plan of giving us temporary BitLocker access to be able to get in there and to get out. We had a giant sign-up sheet where we could volunteer. We're based in different areas. Like I'm in Southwest Grand Rapids. Tyler's actually out in Holland.
Yep.
We saw that sheet fill up pretty quickly, and I think the peak we had almost between 300 and 400 people signing up?
I think it was actually north of 5, I
Okay.
believe, by
See?
the end of it. So
Okay.
the first 3 to 4 hours, I know I signed up 3 hours late. I was watching because, like you, 6 o'clock rolls around, my sleep mode on my phone turns off, work mode starts turning on, and then all of a sudden it's just bzz, 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 everything, right? So you kind of like one eye, still kind of sleepy, look at it, and I start seeing all the stuff about Crowdstrike, and I'm just like, okay, what's going on? Let's check the chat, and the chat's just flood, and we already have remediation groups, and BCA's already spooling up, and people are already signing up on the sheet. So by like 9 o'clock, when I decided to put my name down, because everyone is putting their name down, and that's one of the big things I wanted to talk about, and the outcome if it had not been the case where we had so many volunteers, but. When I saw so many people signing up, I think I was already close to 400 when I signed up, and I think by the end of it, which was like middle of the day, I think we had like 580 names, like crazy. It's those volunteers too. It's incredible to have that kind of rallying strength without
100%.
being
Yep.
told. I'm sure there were
Yep.
some on there that were voluntold, but I think there would have carried a little bit of a stain if some people like us didn't sign up, but there was nothing, implicit about it. It was just let's get it done, and it was funny because I live in Zeeland, and what's that?
I had to go on that way.
I don't know what you're
The
saying.
mic. Sorry.
Oh yeah. I don't
Your
know. What
mic
you
was
said.
more at the bar. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. You can pick up the bar noise. It's good for the ambience. But so I live in Zeeland, which there's a hospital in Zeeland that we own, and are part of the system. Shouldn't say we own it, but yeah. And I got sent to Watervliet, which was an hour away. That's my fault, I guess, for signing up late. But there were a few people who had a lot of travel that day because of so many volunteers, and I give credit to the BCA team and whoever was running that volunteer sheet, because they were keeping numbers and they knew where the gaps were. And instead of just sending me to Zeeland, where there already were, I don't know, a dozen or so people,
Yep.
they sent me to a place out in the sticks, Southwest Michigan, Watervliet community, that didn't really have anybody. There was 3, I think. It's a small hospital, but there were DS was already strapped there trying to help. There's only 1 or 2 techs, I think.
Yep.
So good on them for sending me there. But no, I think that morning was very unique, special, and also impressive in that how we responded. The other side of it too is that in a black and white world that we don't live in, but if we were, and there was 0 volunteering, my biggest curiosity was, how would this have been handled in a sterile environment with nobody stepping up?
Oh yeah, I
When we're
didn't think about that,
talking
because
about-
your companies probably ran into that, right?
And this is a little bit of a segue into the business continuity or continuity of operations, however you want to call it. But what would that have looked like if we didn't have that contingent of volunteers? I'm curious. I don't know. I'm sure BCA had a handle on it, and maybe that is part of the plan, as we knew we would have volunteers. Who knows how many, but I would be curious to see if that was like zero volunteer. How many people would we have had on staff to actually help? That's kind of a scary thought, but what that recovery time would have looked like. So again, coming from the BCA world, I did CorpSec before I did InfoSec. It's just things that keep you up at night, stuff like this. Doomsday scenario. And you can plan all you want until it happens, you don't know. And so I think that's just what I keep pondering about the CrowdStrike incident, and that I'm just glad we had the volunteers that we did. That is the number one in my mind when I think about it. But I'm not sure what else your thoughts are on it, but I'm just glad it's over.
Well, it was interesting because I had a touch base with Jim.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, he's our deputy CISO. I have every other month mentoring touch bases with him. One of the things I had talked about he had brought up, he's like, well, what did you guys do when you first got there? Mm-hmm. Irony is I went to the Zeeland one, which is by his house, and he went downstate. And I had told him, well, traditional incident stuff had kicked in, right? Like I've been an analyst on, WannaCry and, you name it, incidents, and that kind of stuff kicked in. So on site, talked to the field services person, said, hey, is there room, that we could use, command room that we could set up? and all it's weird because like the
So that was
training,
your idea?
yeah,
War room?
the training, you know, kind of like the training kicked in. So we had the whiteboard. I asked the technical field service, think about tech, like on-site tech support for the
Yeah.
hospitals, and then list, okay, what rooms have you done? What rooms haven't you done? By then, more people started showing up, and we funneled them to that one spot. The one thing that just I was kind of smiled and happy, and to your point, even a little shocked but not shocked about, is the different types of IT departments we had showed up. We had people from our electronic health records support team,
Informatics.
Rob Weshy, who is on this podcast from time to time. Email,
Yeah.
our email security,
Yep.
just a great range. Some developers, our incident response manager, Viet, happened to be out at our location.
Excellent.
So
he
the
went
next
to
thing you
Zealand?
know, yeah.
Oh, I didn't
the
know
next
that.
thing you know, you had about 10 of us working with the field services, going to the different places. And then the other thing that was super nice, and maybe this just because this is healthcare, so just the way it was, is between the doctors and the practice managers and everybody chipped in. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, hey, this one down here, like they were coordinating with us, and we didn't even have to direct them, right? So it just, maybe we're a little bit spoiled because we are healthcare, but it just was really, really neat to see everybody coalesce around that. But
Yeah.
to your point, maybe it is a little bit of, that experience of having worked incidents before combined with, with healthcare. You do see, people tend to work together, but that was something where we didn't even pull out a playbook.
Yeah,
Right. So
exactly.
I mean, was that along the lines of what you kind of ran into downstate?
100%. At Water of Elite, there were random, DS representatives. So the DS support person that they have at that hospital was there, I guess, most of the day in the morning. He had to leave. I had gotten there, that person was already gone, and it was 2 volunteers left from like informatics and then training team. That was it. And there was no war room. There was nothing of that, scale at that hospital yet. I just literally started walking around. The reception desk had no idea what was going on.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
She's a wonderful volunteer. She's probably in her high 80s. She doesn't really
Oh,
care.
that's right, because it is a smaller location.
Yeah, I had to show
That's
her my
right.
badge and be
Yep.
like, no, I work for Corewell. What's happening? Is there a meetup? And she said, well, I don't know. So I just said, I'm going to take a look around. Started walking around, and I saw 2 people in a gift shop at a computer and a piece of paper, and that's how I got integrated into the recovery effort. Was stepping in and helping out with that, because like you said, admin access was an issue. Working through that with them, but no, we never had a war room of any kind, which was a great call. But we were small enough that we just hit it floor to floor. Each one of us went different directions, had the script from Crowdstrike, and just started working, documenting things that we saw that we couldn't fix. There were other issues after the network was down, or not the network, but the endpoints were down, and then
Yep.
they couldn't come back on the network for whatever reason after we fixed it. So that was just a couple of things in the after action and the ongoing remediation. But frankly, it was way smoother than it should have been. And to the point of op tempo and what we were up against for the rest of that weekend and what was coming around is the biggest, probably most unprecedented change to our organization since doubling overnight a couple years ago. But it brought me back a lot, and I was talking to my wife about this that night. Like, I had some of the nervous energy that I had back when I was in the military, and we'd either be in the field for training or in a live environment on deployment or something, where you just feel like you have a mission and these wrinkles come in and you don't know what you can take anymore. You're sitting there, whether it's 12 of your guys or a platoon or a company or whoever you're with, and you're just going out on operation or mission after mission, and you just don't know what more you can do or take, and you get orders down from higher to say, oh, well, we're going to do this now too, and we're going to keep going, and we're going to do this, and you're just like throwing every curse word in the book towards the top, because you just like, they're going to kill us, right? I mean,
Right.
And it's hyperbole, but not in that case, it wasn't. But you somehow do it. You make it happen. And then you're sitting back like, oh, was I the problem? Am I underestimating myself? Like, these guys knew what they were doing the whole time. Wow, no wonder they're captains and generals, and like, or CEOs or directors or CISOs. Like, it's just having faith in your leaders. Always staying skeptical of them. I think that's a responsibility as the dregs.
Well, trust but verify.
Trust but verify,
that's
never
the
trust,
irony,
always
right?
verify. But knowing at the end of the day, their faith in us to get the job done outweighs our skepticism, and it typically does. There's been a few cases where hasn't been the most positive outcome, but
you bring up a good point, because they didn't. I think that faith point comes to my mind, because think about it, we got out relatively quickly. They had like a general skeleton plan of what they wanted to do, but the leadership had the wherewithal to understand, okay, there's going to be stuff that comes in the field, out there that we'll just kind of have to adapt.
Yep.
So, and we did. I mean, that's probably the other thing, to your point, where I was super happy with, the way everybody, all of our foot soldiers, so to speak, were. But the faith by leadership, and for them to say, hey, we have good people, we have smart people, let's let them adapt a little bit in the field. But, your military background, right, that, when I get into stuff like that, my brother had even talked about, like, you train so much that what's the saying, like, it in your sleep or whatever.
Yeah, muscle memory.
So where, you trust your training. And I will say, the incident, having incident experience and then sitting where it was natural.
Yep.
Right. Like, and what was neat is, nobody looked at me like, oh, Bregg's being a loudmouth, taking charge again. It wasn't that, but
right.
One, I didn't communicate it like that. Like, hey, everybody, I'm going to be in charge. It's more like, hey, this is my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
This is my thoughts. This is what we've done in the past. I've had experience in this. And then having good people around you, everybody coalesce. So it wasn't necessarily that I was in charge of that war room.
Right.
It was more like, hey, I have this idea. This is what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about it? And again, that the training kicks in where, automatically.
Yeah, exactly. And being that voice in the room to speak up, because a lot of people might have good ideas, they don't want to speak up. I've done that myself a few times. I typically am the person that can't stay quiet because I just don't like the quiet. I'm the person that answers first in class, not because I'm just like Johnny on the spot with the answer, just because the awkwardness of silence, sitting there, like back in school or whenever, and somebody, teacher asks a question, nobody's answering, I'm the guy that jumps up. And that's probably how I got this job in the first place. It's like, because I just can't handle the silence, I'm just hyperactive in that regard, but also our team is a lot like that. So it makes sense that you would have stepped in and just started throwing ideas out there. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do. So again, like what we were talking about before we aired, is the intangibles that we deliver, or the tangible results with intangible methods, right? So I think having us around, and what we do with engagement is paramount for incidents like that. Volunteers.
100%.
Volunteers.
100%. All right, we're going to switch things up a little bit. Over the last couple weeks, we've had some interesting engagements with the business.
Yeah.
Right. Some can be challenging, some aren't. But you and I talked a little bit, in the prep session about how a clear vision is coming into play. Like, things are in motion just in healthcare between AI and, and financial toughness or whatever. I don't want to use headwind. I hate the term. It's been overused. Yeah. The financial headwind we're in. But I mean, it is an interesting time with finances. So that part is true. We're starting to see a trend around just data security in general, and that's leading into discussions to where you talked about, like, going back to the basics, principal least privileged, MFA, and the business not understanding, hey, just because you did something in the past doesn't mean that can continue going forward.
How many times?
I mean, what are your thoughts about some of these, engagements that we've had and some of the challenges that we've had?
Well, you nailed it right at the top there with the financial piece. That's never going to go away. It's even when the financial tailwinds are here, when we're doing great, it's always going to be about what do we want to pay for? Why do we need this? You know, we have to think in the CIA triad, right? Availability. So they use that crutch against us of like, well, we don't want the customer to have to jump through these hoops. We want it to be available. We want it to be up and ready. I was like, okay, you make this extra step happen so that way the whole thing doesn't get shut down in a matter of weeks or months or days and before a breach happens or before something gets in or before we get ransomware because you didn't want to do this right now. You want whoever it is, a provider, a customer, whatever, an agent, to not have to do this one extra step. I understand in a critical care environment, you know, we have protocols for that. That's a whole separate thing, but people don't want to pay for stuff. The double-edged sword is that vendors know that. So they put a price on it that might be a little bit more egregious at times. You know, literally you can look at the architecture, it's flipping a switch for sometimes. And, you know, we can work out the details of what those data points are going to be that constitute for, you know, a viable MFA solution. But flipping that switch costs X, Y, or Z in a license, you know, or in an agreement. And then the business starts to balk at that. You know, like, what are the odds of this actually happening? Well, let me show you. And we can show you myriad articles where this happens all the time, including just recently. So just do it is all I ever say about MFA. And I throw the book at them when they don't want to. You've been on some recent ones, not MFA per se, but whenever the MFA conversation comes up, I don't get too flexible with solutioning for those because I never leave it up to a yes or a no, or it's always like okay, well, how are we going to do this? Because you don't have a choice, even though they do. They can say no. We have a process for that.
Right.
You know, and if they want to go to that process, it's not going to be good for them with all the use cases that we've seen. So having federated solutions is always phenomenal. I think that's going to be huge in the weeks and months and iterations to come for our business. But I always say in the healthcare environment, have your MFA. Do it. However it needs to happen, just get it done. We've had complexities from the other side of our business when there's more money involved and payments and PCI. Like the fact that it's still even being discussed is a crime. But, you know, it is. So.
The key point on that, right, is that it seems to be a balance of that, you know, moving forward, moving quickly, and adapting some of our stuff to change with that. So it is interesting to see as we get farther along in like the data classification journey, how important that is to be able to get the right visibility and right access, because that's kind of one of the other things that we're just seeing in healthcare right now is the balance of, okay, on one hand, we have to have transparency from government mandates, but literally the government talks also at the other side of their mouth that, you know, you have the HIPAA requirements, everything else. So
100%.
how are you gonna secure this data? And I think that's going to be a key thing going into the second part of this year and beginning part of 2025 is figuring out that like classification.
100%.
Do you need access to all that, right? We had a conversation last week. Like what's the amount of data that you need access to? And it was the difference in the conversation was, is this something that the business can do, one of our divisions could do, like in a batch file, right? Is this pretty structured? You do a batch file, do you need this stuff weekly? Do you need it daily? To which then they came back and talked to Discovery, right? Well, what if we want to add on to that? How are we going to access this other data to be able to maybe then add stuff to the batch file? Do you think that's probably going to be kind of a challenge?
It's going to be a huge challenge. And just to bring it back to your point about government regulation and getting in its own way, is that we have standards, you know, CFR, NIST, and all that we have to adhere to, or that we do adhere to. We make our recommendations off of what the government's saying is the best standard going forward for this type of deployment. And at the same time, we have the other arm of the government wanting things right now that are being prevented because of the blockers in place by the other regulations that they're enforcing. So we navigate that on a regular basis. That engagement, that was kind of a little wrinkle I kept in the back of my head. Like, we're doing this because we need to for regulatory security purposes. And then the CDC is on their butts because they can't get it done because it's not secure. But they want their reports. They don't care how.
Right.
So I never want to get in the way of the business workflows, especially when it's research that could benefit, society as a whole. But also we're beholden to the other arm of the government that's telling us we have to. And for job security's sake, we want to make sure that stuff happens.
Yep.
So in that particular case, it's one of the ones where, due to certain constraints, we lost the battle, so to speak. It's still in the works, but it's going to the exception process that I can't stand sending people to because I'd rather just have it fixed. Except for there are discovery, architecture, and blockers in place that do not allow for that right now in the use case that they want and the workflow that they require. To do a batch file, they push back on that because they don't know what they want on any given day, or they're going to change what they want on any given day. Their architecture versus ours isn't compatible, even though it is, with a little extra effort. That's going to be the route that we push for, but it's just those blockers every single day, and it's because historical evidence has told us this is the best way to do it, industry best practice, government regulations, but at the same time the government is holding the feet to the fire of the other side of our business because those blockers are preventing them from doing what they need to do. So we commiserate. It's not strictly just like a security all or nothing thing. That's why our job exists, is because we have empathy to understand their plight, what they're trying to get done, their objective, and how we can do it the best way possible. And so I know that's what we do on a daily basis, but it's worth highlighting in use cases like that where benefits can be large, but risk is also fairly large with that one. So that's a vendor wanting the keys to the kingdom, through a means that isn't controlled by us. We don't like that. So.
Yep. Okay, we're going to finish up with one more topic because, like I said, this isn't a standard podcast. This is a little sneak peek into this fall. What do you think, as more businesses embrace like Agile and, scaled Agile framework and everything else, how do you see that fitting in the security world, understanding that like an engineering team that may be project focused is gonna, run things a certain way, and then you have a team like ours, where business engagement, where we literally are beholden to what the business is doing, what they need help with. What do you think some of the challenges are going to be in that space?
Personally, for me, I come from an ethos of semper gumby, means always flexible.
I learned something new.
Whereas Agile loves to preach about flexibility, and in their short increments, they love to say, you can be as agile as you can be in this because you're only looking at time frames in very, very short, intervals, depending on the structure. But sometimes we need to be more agile than agile, and I've been saying that all year since this whole thing kicked off, where sometimes I see areas where we're going to be locked into channels that may not allow us to be as effective as we can be outside of the conventional engagement standards, conventional warfare. It's not always our thing. So where I see it as a valuable tool for metrics and analytics and to prove our worth and also justify our existence through one way or another, results-driven versus process-driven, like we're a very results-driven team, whereas I see Agile benefiting a very process-driven environment, where you want to see to the minute how much work is being done to one thing versus what we're doing right now can be very similar to what our business engagements would look like. Just a conversation where we're having great ideas and we're developing solutions. They're developing solutions. We're guiding, right? We don't solution. But sometimes we're in that environment where we're not sitting there doing a minute-by-minute analysis of what our job entails. Sometimes at the end of the day, weeks of conversations can lead to a major tangible change. So I think it's there to drive a business and understand where the money's going and understand where the time is going and where they can shore that up and be more efficient. I don't think it's for everybody, though. I think Agile can be implemented in the way that we do it. You know, we use a Kanban versus a Scrum. You know, some teams are more beneficial to have it that way, where you want to be a little more flexible with your time, but you still get the job done. But just like at the CSA CloudCon, you had the CISO panel, and you had a few other experts up there too that talked about the value of their employees and time management and how it looks for them. And I can't remember his name. Gosh, I'm gonna have to ask you later. But he had one of like the most impactful responses to me is that, and sort of comforting too, that there are bosses out there and leaders out there that just say like, on a day-to-day, I don't want to see what you're doing to the minute.
Jarrell Van Oss, yep.
I want to see.
CISO Acrisure.
I want to see your results. If you're driving products and you're delivering things to me, that's what I care about. If our job is being done, and I've always been that type of person. You know, it's more about, you know, the journey, A to B. You know, I don't get caught up as much in the details, but I want to make sure at the end of the day we're getting things done that we need to. And so, as a leader in the past, that's how I was, for better or worse. And as a contributor today, I can't speak to how much I appreciate that flexibility that our leaders give us, and that we get stuff done and we're not chained down by regulation.
Non-efficient processes.
Exactly. So again, to summarize all that, Agile can be as much of a hindrance as a help. If you adopt it in too aggressive of a manner, if you put anybody or everybody into an environment that constricts their movement, you don't want that. So you need that asymmetrical engagement. So that's why I value teams like ours.
All right, that is a good ending point. I hope everybody enjoyed this little recap of some of the crazy things we've experienced this summer, and I look forward to officially kicking off the next season of the podcast in a couple weeks. In the meantime, thank you again, Tyler.
Hey, thanks, Aaron.
All right, and everybody,
Appreciate it.
stay safe out there.
Anytime we want.